Thank you, Carter. Starting with congratulating the our volleyball team, man, they are off to an unbelievable start, and certainly wishing them continued success. And then, being able to go on the road for the first time this year against our rival and also conference opponent in Florida State. And proud of our guys for our effort, our toughness. Certainly got off to three great quarters of football. Not so great in the fourth quarter, but certainly enough to get the win and get it done. And lots of guys played and did have some really significant contributions from a lot of guys. I'm just looking forward to getting back to work, getting better, and getting prepared for an excellent Louisville team coming in here a week from Friday. Questions, please.
Great. Thanks, Coach. As a reminder, if you can use the hand raise function so we know to call on you, and we'll start with Tim Reynolds. Tim, go ahead.
Thank you, Carter. Thank you, Mario, for doing this.
Sure.
The schedule, it's obviously unusual. Rivalry game, then a bye week, then a rivalry game, then a bye week. Nothing you can do about it, obviously, but one, how did you like the way your guys handled the first bye week? And two, is there an advantage when you go through the rigors of what is a Miami FSU game to have a little extra time before you get back at it?
Well, it's a good question. I mean, we certainly it wasn't a schedule that you ease into, right? I mean, right away you've got Notre Dame, and then you've got some of those other teams that you mentioned. So you had to be at least do your best to be at peak performance game one. So that requires an unbelievable summer and a really rigorous camp, knowing that you're going to have these two bye weeks scrunched in between a 3-week period of time. So I guess in essence, there's a lot of value to it if you have certain injuries that can be healed in that time. If not, there is kind of a, giddy up whoa, which you don't love too much. But we've used it the right way. We've healed up. We've worked really, really hard. We worked today. And also, finding time to prep for a very challenging opponent. And actually both opponents do things schematically that are so different than the rest of our schedule where, you got to treat it as a blessing and make no complaints or no remarks and just go forward and use it to the best of your abilities.
Mario, one quick follow. You've been very open since you got here about, the role of bringing back, the brotherhood, the alumni, the people that, set the tone on Green Tree for what these kids have now. Michael Irvin has obviously kind of taken on a life of its own, being the unofficial cheerleader for this program and what he does on the sideline. His resume speaks for itself, and you can still see how much this thing still means to him. How important is it to have that input from guys who did it before? Thank you.
Well, I think the best part of the way Mike brings his energy is the fact that he makes it very clear he's very grateful for the University of Miami and for his time as a Miami Hurricane. And I think that's a feeling that needs to be expressed by any and all of us that ever played here, because, man, a lot of us came in here not knowing, our head from our feet. And because of that, we had some great teachers and mentors along the way, and they impact us in a manner that, look at some of the careers that have taken off here, both on and off the field. So when guys like that come around, there were more guys at the game. Edgar and James was there. Getting a text from Santana Moss, who I was a GA when he was here. I remember his whole Superman, mantra that he brought to Miami. Devin Hester, Greg Olson, I don't know if he couldn't make it, but he's always in contact. Dan Morgan. And there's so many. It goes on and on and on. And it's not just those frontline stars. It's the guys that played here that maybe were behind the scene and were role players that you get a chance to communicate with. That is strong. That's why I came to Miami as a player. That's why a lot of my teammates, our teammates, came here to Miami. And that's why a lot of guys have come back. And we need to keep doing that. And we need to just keep making it almost like a sign, a token of gratitude. And now it is our role to do that and mentor the guys that have followed us, which is this current team right now, and help them get to the future.
Next, we'll go to Barry Jackson. Barry, go ahead.
Hi, Coach. It's difficult, if not impossible, for NFL teams to nail all their signings in free agency every March and April. And yet you all seemingly have nailed it at each position in this past portal cycle, getting one or multiple players at every position who've been really good. Could you tell us how that process has worked? I know you don't have someone with a GM title, but who has been most involved in evaluation of these players on tape, which leads to this successful portal cycle?
Well, I mean, recruiting and evaluation and projecting players, in the words of Art Kehoe, he used to tell us all the time, it's the most imperfect science in the world. You don't know who's going to explode in an awesome way and develop at a really high level. You don't know who's going to have an unfortunate injury, who's going to fall in love with another path in life and maybe lose interest in football, or you just never know. There's so many different avenues these guys can take when they arrive. And so it's everybody's involved. I know we don't have titles, but I just think the general manager title is very different in the NFL than it would be in college since there's no set salary cap. But our recruiting department works hand in hand with our coaches and myself. The recruiting department headed up by Dennis Smith, who does an unbelievable job in making sure that we are all watching film, that we're all evaluating film, that we're all exchanging our opinions, our evaluations, our assessments, that we're doing them in person, that we're getting people here to camp, that we're going on the road, watching them competitive situations, that we're doing thorough background checks, and also knowing that when we arrived, you really had to overhaul the roster and not only get your frontline players, but you had to, stagger it in a manner where it's going to keep getting better every year. So it is a team effort. Everybody's involved. We need more out of everybody. I think there'll be, I don't think not one single person could take credit. I don't believe that I should ever take credit for that as well. But we do push it. We need more out of everybody all the time. It is talent acquisition is tied into player development and personnel usage. And when you're able to hit on all three of those at a time is when the magic happens. And we have a long ways to go, but we have certainly seen a lot of progress in those areas coming together.
And I had one last question on the same topic, if it's okay, Carter. How many eyes do you want, Mario, on each veteran portal player before you offer him a scholarship? How many eyes in your building do you want to review tape of that player?
As many as possible.
Yeah.
I could lay out a blueprint for you that looks like something out of the movie A Beautiful Mind, where there's all kinds of, attachments and byways and highways, but it is extremely thorough. And we don't want groupthink. We want a think tank. We want a, organic, natural, very, I want the critical factors on every single player without seeing somebody else's evaluation. I want to see the honest evaluation of a coach so that there's no hiding in the evaluation game. Nowadays it's easy. I miss the old days when there wasn't an internet and you had to go out and you had to have conviction on a player with what you saw, what you evaluated. Now, if he's got 20 offers, people are just going to throw an offer out there too. So I don't know. I think we certainly we have a really good process. I want to credit again, all the people involved, especially Dennis. And again, long ways to go.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Next, we'll go to Jordan McPherson. Jordan, go ahead.
Yeah, hey Mario, to stick with that a little bit, just two of the guys specifically, Keontae Scott and Jacoby Thomas, really big games last game. I think Keontae was out there for every defensive snap. Just how have you seen the two of them sort of fit into their roles, especially since they came in after spring ball and had to sort of pick things up pretty quickly?
Yeah. To make defenses nowadays, when you spend a lot of time in nickel, your nickel has to be an absolute stud. And watching Keontae more in 23 than in 24, when the scheme predicated him being more in that role, we felt he was a top shelf player, hands down. And then watching Jacoby, who was a starter and then split time over there, we thought that one, his ability to communicate, because you see that on film all the time. You saw it. Number two, the way he would trigger. His reaction time was off the charts. And then number three, his physicality was something that was really, really impressive. And we need to be more physical and better tacklers on the perimeter with the ability to play man to man. So we thought those two guys were the perfect fit for us. And they'll be the first to tell you they're unsatisfied. They have not played to their full potential yet, but they have certainly made us better. They're progressing really well. They're doing a really good job, and their best football is ahead of them.
And then wanted to ask you about just the play of the line of scrimmage. Obviously, that's your bread and butter. That's where you'd say everything succeeds. You want everything to succeed. Just both offensive line and defensive line through 5 games. What has stood out to you on both ends?
Well, I like to think of it as our bread and butter. I think that the philosophy and the blueprint, I think we all now share the vision collectively. We've come a long way. We've come from very narrow, streamlined body types to really thick and powerful type trench guys that can really they can create movement. They can affect the line of scrimmage. They can be very disruptive on defense. Guys with more twitch that are weight room junkies that understand the value of strength and conditioning. I think Coach Herb has done a phenomenal job with his staff and those guys. So I would evaluate in a manner where we've come a long way, but as you watch film, there's so many areas where we have to make massive improvements. I mean, what we want to accomplish requires us to get a ton better at a ton of different things. So we're at work today and saw some improvement today, and we'll get right back at it again tomorrow.
Next, we'll go to Adam Lichtenstein. Adam, go ahead.
Hey Mario, thanks for doing this today. Just looking back at some of the stuff from Saturday, I saw, you guys had 13 penalties, and right now you guys are, I think, tied for most penalties and per game in the conference. Just how much have you been, trying to clean that stuff up? How much is that going to be a focus over the next, over the bye week, to try to clean the pre-snap stuff up, and something like the procedural and penalties and stuff.
No doubt it's priority list at the top of it. Certainly when we hurt ourselves, it affected our drives. It affected the outcome of drives as well. We overcome them sometimes, but when you play really good teams, those things could be fatal. And so, the benefit of being able to learn your lessons without learning it through consequence is great. But it has to be driven all the way through because certainly it's not a stat line that we want to be on. And it starts with myself and every single person in this building. It's not acceptable. It's not what we preach or teach, but we've got to make sure we get the results that we want.
And next we'll go to David Lake. David, go ahead.
Yeah, Coach, feel like every week we're asking you about Bain and Mesidor, but wanted to ask you this week about just their snap counts being so high. I think their final snap counts were in like the mid 70s, high 70s. What does that number say about them as players? And have you ever coached defensive ends that have played that much in a college game that didn't go to overtime?
Sure. I mean, there was a time where no one came out of the game, right? The snap count was high for them, and the first thing I do is I just look at their coach, Jason Taylor, and ask him, "Did you ever come out of a game?" He says no. Played up to 80 snaps. Now, is that ideal? Absolutely not, because there's other good players on our team, and we're getting them more involved, and they're getting snaps as well. When those guys got such a high rep count and were still as productive, as effective, and affected the game as much as they did, it speaks volumes of them as competitors, as tough guys, and as guys that really invested a ton in strength, conditioning, nutrition, and prepping their bodies to be able to go deep into a game like this when so much is on the line. So a lot of credit to them. They don't mind being pushed at all, and certainly there's going to be some times where the snap count's really low, and there's going to be games like Saturday where everybody's got to have a whatever it takes mentality.
I want to ask you too, just in general, how's the overall health of the team coming out of the game?
I think okay. I mean, you got some things that that hurt a lot, and that kind of you have football. You have week 5. I wouldn't call it an injury report, but I call it a team health report where we will benefit from having the bye week where we can still get the right kind of working with a lot of guys that maybe not necessarily need a 2-hour full contact practice, but there's a lot of guys that do. So we're doing it as responsibly and as intelligently as we possibly can, always keeping the health of our team at the forefront of the decision process. But it's a very detailed plan for each and every person, but for the most part, we feel like we're pretty healthy.
We've got time for a couple more. We'll go next to Chris Stock. Chris, go ahead.
Yeah, Coach, just your overall thoughts when you look back at the FSU game, maybe on film, just what stood out to you. And then if you could comment a little bit on the fourth quarter, just the large lead and obviously the way it ended, maybe some things that stood out to you or your messaging to the team with finishing better, obviously.
Yeah, I would say 3 quarters of dominant football and 1 quarter that wasn't up to the standard. Looking back and reflecting on it and analyzing it, I mean, we called it to win. We called it to be able to extend our lead and up 28-3 with the ball. We had our chance to do so. And back to the penalty questions that came up earlier, penalties derailed our 2 of our last 3 drives. And certainly something that our players immediately recognized after the game, because of course you're always fired up about a win up there, but there was a certain sense of, you know what, we're better than that. we could finish, and we could have put an exclamation point on it. Still got the win, still dominated for almost the entire game, but that's not the way we finish. And you cannot allow yourself as a team, we cannot allow ourselves as a program, me as a coach, to not play the full 60 minutes and overtime if necessary. Can't ever do that. You saw again this week, there were multiple overtime games, a ton of very tight games in conference all over the country. There is no wiggle room for allowing and giving away plays. So a good lesson learned, some good deep diving into the film and the what's, the hows, and the whys to get better. And we go from there.
And we'll wrap up with one more question from Adam. Adam, go ahead.
Hey again. So kind of speaking of like those late game situations, those fourth quarter situations, how much do you balance, I guess, feel for the game, input from assistant coaches, things like that, versus analytics, like, 4th and 5 at the opponent 30, we do this, yada, 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 things like that. How do you kind of take in all that information and kind of decide where to go from there?
Yeah, you lean on both. Analytically, you always look at what does it say, and then you think right away, present moment in time, what is the tone of the game? Is it a defensive struggle? Is it a shootout? Is one side of the ball gassed? Is one side of the ball injured? Are you not going to be able to do this because a certain player is missing or is not having a good day? You take those things into account, and then you make a decision really before it actually happens. You should have something in mind before you get there. And we had a similar situation the other day and went with what we thought was the right call.
Call on you, and we will start with David Lake. David, go ahead.
Hey, Coach, wanted to start, I guess, by asking you about the flea flicker play. I guess, when did you think maybe that, or why did you think that was something that might hit in the game? How much of, dialing that up was about the timing of when to call it, and just in general, the overall execution of the play, how it came together?
They talked all week about stopping the run, right? And getting obsessed about stopping the run, being more physical. So I figured their safeties would be aggressive. So it was a play that through the course of the game planning, I wanted to run, but I didn't necessarily know like what set and how it was going to be organized until we had all the formations and personnel groupings that we wanted to use. And then I had to make sure in that situation, because I did think, they would bring pressure. I had to make sure that it was, being a 2-back set helped, because then I could have one back protecting and one back handling the ball. And so, the execution of that was the running backs did a phenomenal job. I know the throw and the catch is what gets all the praise, but Mark and Marty on that play really made the play. The up front, the O-line gave us a great pocket. They triggered the 2 running backs, and after Mark tossed it back, he went and protected, so it was a super clean pocket, and Malley made the right decision on the in the middle route. And so it was one of those deals that, and I don't really have a situation I want to call that in. If you take it in golf terms, I'm more of a Freddie Couples play caller than a Bryson DeChambeau. I'm not very structured that way. So it's all about feel. And we got a big turnover, and I just felt like if we hit it, it would take the wind out of their sail a little bit of a gut punch. And then if we didn't hit it, we're at midfield and just play football. So pretty easy decision right there. I could have called it in other situations, but I just felt like that was the proper time.
I want to ask you about just play action in general. Obviously, that play was play action, or kind of a play action, but it seemed like play action was big against Florida State in general. And also just seems like, correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems like you're doing play action a little bit more this year in general compared to last year. Is that just leaning into Carson's strength with that? Is that something he does well? What goes into him executing play action well?
He does do it well. He does a great job with the ball. The ball gets stuck in the running back's belly, and he really does a good job selling it. But it probably more so has to do with our ability to run the football. I know people are going to be obsessed with stopping the run. So if you're going to run the ball efficiently, you need to play action efficiently. And so just trying to find ways to match up those play action shots with the run game that we're running of the week. And so, but yeah, Carson it's a combination of both to be fair. I mean, Carson's really good at it. He throws a really, really good deep ball, but we're also up front. We're really efficient in the run game. So it's going to get hats down so we can get some one-on-one shots.
Next, we'll go to Adam Lichtenstein. Adam, go ahead.
Hey Shannon, thanks for doing this today. I was just asking Mario a few minutes ago, kind of just about like that late game decision making process. Like how much of it is feel and like game situation? How much do you guys, are you talking to the players about what feels like, what the feel of the game is, and how much of it is, going to analytics and looking at that and seeing what the mathy move, I guess, would be the proper analytic move would be.
I think it's a little bit of both. How the game's going. We want to try to stay aggressive in those situations. And I just listen to them. I just listen to coach. I mean, he's got the analytics and all the stuff. And so, I mean, we talk about it and make a decision and roll with it. I mean, I love the decision. I think that we just got to execute the play a little better. I mean, the play was there. It probably scores if Malley doesn't run into the tackle a little bit. There's nobody out there. And so it's the right decision. It's the right play call. It was just lack of execution on our part offensively, which we had a little bit of that in the fourth quarter, and it wasn't anything more to do with anything than like somebody, we kind of traded making mistakes in the fourth quarter a little bit, like one guy here, one guy there. It all comes down to execution. And so we had the play, and I wanted to call it in a situation like that, and we had it, and we had the defense we wanted. We just, didn't connect on it. It happens.
And even with like even earlier, like in the fourth quarter, I'm not trying to question like what you guys did. I'm just curious about the process, I guess, of deciding how much to lean on running the ball, bleed the clock versus trying to pass the ball a little bit, risk stopping the clock, but also try to get those first downs. Like again, like it's kind of what goes into the process there.
I mean, you do switch your mindset when you're up, when you got a healthy lead, 28-3. Our defense is playing really well, and so you want to still be aggressive, but I call it cautiously aggressive. So we are, we're built in a way where we can grind out those games. I mean, we've done it. I mean, in the 80-yard drive against Florida to win the game or to put it 2 touchdowns up. I mean, we ran it almost every time. And so I thought you got to give a little bit of credit to Florida State, obviously. But ultimately, it comes down to us executing. And so if you look at those drives and you really break them down, which obviously I have, we had a holding penalty that put us in a hole. Then it really didn't matter after that. Like it's second and whatever, and then we try to get half of it back, and we got a little less than half. Then it becomes 3rd and 16. 3rd and 16, we're backed up. I don't want to do anything stupid in that situation to maybe create a short field for those guys. So that one was more so the penalty kind of put us into a situation that was unworkable. And the other 2 drives, I mean, honestly, if one guy does this certain deal, it's out. I mean, it was one guy here and there, and then we were aggressive on the second down and threw the ball, and we threw it slightly behind him. If he hits him in stride, he might score. At least he's going to get the first down. And then we get the first down on the next drive, and then that's when we went for it on 4th and whatever it was, 8 or 7, and was slightly off on that throw. But ultimately, it really is about execution in those situations. I mean, you do want to kind of, be cautiously aggressive, but still take shots when you can. And we did. I mean, it's not like we ran it every time. We threw it a handful of times. We didn't connect on the throws. And so we were slightly off on the throws. So that's the chances you take in those situations when you do throw it is when it goes incomplete, the clock's not moving. And so, it's damned if you do, damned if you don't right there as far as you want to be aggressive, but you don't want the ball. And there's really no safe throw. I mean, anytime you put the ball in the air, it has a chance to be incomplete. And so I do, with this being said, though, I ultimately trust our guys up front. Like I have a lot of trust in our guys up front. I have a lot of trust in our running backs. And I do feel that we can grind games out, in those kind of situations. Now, it didn't work out necessarily exactly as I had planned, but we had a big enough lead that it didn't matter. So that was good.
Thank you. I think that makes a lot of sense.
Next, we'll go to Gary Furman. Gary, go ahead.
Hey Shannon, how are you? Couple things. Florida State was able to control the running game better than I can't remember, anybody doing the last couple years. And were they doing something in particular that was disrupting blocking schemes up front or, creating problems?
No, I mean, they just accounted a lot of people to the run game. I mean, run game a lot of times comes down to numbers. And so now I think schematically they did play different than they've played this year. They were more they were a little bit more four down and bare. They didn't play a lot of the airy type fronts that they had played, and they didn't blitz as much. They kind of put their feet in the ground and played football. And ultimately, and I've said this multiple times, but I do think the beauty of how we're structured offensively is okay, commit to stopping the run. I mean, we'll throw 70% for 4 touchdowns. So it's either like however you want to play, that's fine. If you want to play off, I think we can pound you and we can dink and dunk. If you want to play like they play and you want to get safeties involved, then you're going to give up big plays. And so, I mean, it's not necessarily, I don't look at it in the sense of we were, lacking in the run game. That's just what they chose to take away. Good. Like, you choose to take that away, fine. Your corners better be able to cover. And theirs didn't.
And another, just as a follow-up to what you've been talking about recently, I mean, at the expense of contributing to that rat poison that Coach talks about, it's kind of obvious now, 5 games into the season, that this offense is capable of playing at a really, really, really high level. You've played some really good defenses, really good football teams, and for the most part have been dominant until you got into that mindset of, now you have a comfortable lead and you're trying to get home. And you've also mentioned a couple of times, including today, the phrase "not wanting to do something stupid." So what I was curious about is, as an offensive coordinator who's kind of piloting this high octane machine and inspiring thoughts because of how well you're playing, how much pressure is it on you as a play caller to know or have the feel when to dial it back, when to call it a little bit differently, and just strike that balance?
I don't think it's pressure. I mean, I think you got to use common sense. It's not about a certain ego, or I'm not trying to get a certain amount of yards or whatever. All I'm trying to do is play complementary football. I trust the people around me. We tell our players to trust each other. I tell Carson, look, trust the people around you, trust the O-line, trust the running backs. It's no different in my situation. I trust our defense. I trust our special teams. I trust our head coach. And so I know that it isn't just about me. And so I'm a servant in this process. And so I'm trying to do everything I can do offensively to run the game to win the game. I'm not trying to do anything other than just win the game. And so ultimately that's going to look different at times. Sometimes it's going to look like 250 yards rushing and 150 yards passing. Sometimes it's going to be 300 yards passing and 70 yards rushing if they want to commit that way. And then there's certain situations and flow of the game where, heck, no different than the situation I was just talking about. We're up 28-3 in the fourth quarter and we get a holding penalty, so we're backed up on like the 15. Well, that's one of those situations where, look, I don't want to do anything stupid. Like I can try to throw like a deep dagger route right there if y'all want me to, but ultimately there's a lot of things that can happen there that's going to hurt our team. And so sometimes, punting and making that other team drive the field is not the worst thing. And we did the one thing I thought, not one, but one of the few things that I was really proud of is we didn't have any turnovers. So if you really look at their drive chart versus our drive chart, they had to drive the whole field almost the whole game. There was one possession they got at midfield, but ultimately the whole game they had to drive the field. And so that's hard to do versus our defense. I've done it at practice. I've tried to do it at practice, so I know how hard it is to block those guys. And so ultimately that's the answer to your question is it's not as much pressure as it is just having some common sense and some wherewithal about how this team is organized and ultimately just trying to put ourselves in position to win the game. And you're right. I mean, I will say this just to add on to what you said. Our first 5 games of the year have not been like some of these other guys' first 5 games. we've been battle tested and we've played a lot of defenses that are high end defenses. And I thought our guys have performed well and put us in position to win the games. And obviously we have. So very proud of that.
Got time for two more. We'll go back to David first. David, go ahead.
Yeah, Coach, wanted to ask you about two guys, just, you being around them for the first time in a road game type of environment. Of course, Carson, a veteran guy, but your first time being around him. And then Malachi, obviously had a great game, but it was his first road game in that type of environment. Just what you noticed about how they handled that atmosphere, that challenge.
Carson doesn't get affected by anything. I mean, there's not an atmosphere that's going to affect him. He's very calm. He's in control of everything. He's out there changing stuff or whatever all the way to the last second at times. And so I don't worry about him. I mean, he's played a lot of football in some of the best venues in America. So now Tony, on the other hand, hasn't played as much football, but the game is not too big for him. He plays the game as if we're playing it on Green Tree. He doesn't really get too caught up in the outside stuff outside of the actual football field. And so I appreciate that with him being a young guy. He doesn't get emotionally involved in the game. He focuses on the play and the execution of the play. And so I thought we handled the atmosphere well. It was a good atmosphere, and we handled it well. We did have a couple penalties that hurt drives that we have to clean up, but ultimately we handled the environment well. And the couple that stick out is the touchdown that got called back with Malley. I mean, that breaks my heart because it was such a great play, and he made half the defense miss. And so, you make that play and it's 35-3. So,
And we'll wrap up with Adam. Adam, go ahead.
Hey, again, I also wanted to ask about Malachi and just, how you've seen him, you see him develop all through spring and fall. Now that the actual season, how has he kind of grown mentally or, just in his skills over the, course of the first month or so of the season?
we saw his skills early, and you're hesitant to say much about it because until you put it on Saturday, it doesn't matter. And so that was evident. His ability was evident early. Now, what makes him a unique person and unique player is his personality is very consistent. He doesn't have good days and bad days. He just is very like flatline, just the same person every day, which is what I appreciate. And we have a lot of guys like that, and that's what you're really looking for as an athlete. You don't want to be too high or too low. Just kind of be right in the middle and have a steady personality where you just go about your way and do your job. And he has that. He's a pretty quiet kid. He's very humble. And so the one thing you worry about with kids his age is having this type of success is, and y'all said it on here, and Coach says it a lot, but the rat poison's out there, and I keep him grounded, and it's not hard because he's a very humble kid. And so I just appreciate the way he goes about his business every day.
Great. Thank you, Shannon. We'll see you next week. We'll go to David Lake. David, go ahead.
Yeah, Coach, I want to ask you about just the safety play in general. Seems like all those guys stepped up and made different types of plays in different types of ways. And then also just the traits, what traits does Keontae Scott have that make him such an effective nickel in your defense?
Yeah, he's a guy that allows it so you don't have to sub. He can play in the box, he can play in space, he can play coverage. He plays man-to-man on guys really well. He shows the ability to blitz. He does so many different things well, and it allows us just to be more versatile on defense. And then he's a very smart football player. He's played a lot of football. You can tell he's been very well coached. Here and I believe before he came here. And I think that just helps him to have awareness of situational football, awareness of the formation, the situation, the different style of plays that we're seeing. When he can be a little bit more aggressive within the scheme, when he has to be a little bit more careful. And it just allows him to play fast every single week. And, he's got that a little bit of veteran savviness to him where he's always under control. He's always, got a really clear head. And, he's made some really good football plays for us because of his awareness and his ability.
And then Jacoby and Zechariah, just their performances as well.
Yeah, ZP early, he made a couple really good tackles in space. I think they ran that reverse early after the big play, going down into the red zone, and he comes down, runs the alley, presses the hip, makes a really good tackle. But he showed up all day, whether sometimes it wasn't even something that you normally see, just covering a guy up or making a play or reading the quarterback's eyes or playing at the sticks. I thought he tackled really well in this game and made some really good plays, cleaning things up from the post or when we dropped them down. And then same thing with Jacoby. I think a veteran guy that's played a lot of football. He's played different positions. He's played some nickel, he's played some Sam, he's played some deep safety. And just within our schemes, he's getting better and better every single week. And that's where, some of maybe the miscues that we had in camp or, earlier in the season in those first 2 to 3 games. Now those are things that now his awareness level is even better. He's got a better feel for the defense. And I think, between really ZP, Keontae, Jacoby, the linebackers, the corners, their communication is getting better every single week. You can see they're working the better, just with the calls, with the checks, who's helping who in certain situations, and they're getting a better feel for playing together within the scheme every week. And I think that's going to continue to improve. And that's one thing I'm excited about this week with the bye week is improving our communication to another level. Being able to go back through that fourth quarter and then, really there's some plays in the first drive of the game all the way through the game where it's, hey, what did you guys see here? So that way I have a better understanding as a coaching staff. We have a better understanding for some of the different things that we put ourselves in check-wise or why guys saw certain things a certain way and why we played things out a certain way, just to make sure we continue to grow as a defense and get things cleaned up to another level where, we can play even faster as a unit, series in and series out every week.
Next, we'll go to Adam Lichtenstein. Adam, go ahead.
Hey Corey, thank you for doing this today. Just gonna ask about I know you preach violence in your defensive strategy, making sure guys are playing violently. How do you balance that with not doing anything where that's gonna cost a team penalty wise? Like I know Dylan Day had a targeting call. Wesley Bissainthe took out Michael Irvin on the sidelines. When he was making a tackle and got penalized for that tackle. I guess how do you strike that balance between playing violently and not making those kind of mistakes?
Yeah, everything's got to be, smart situational football, smart between the whistles, and it's, we want to be an attacking style defense. We don't want to sit back. We don't want to let the offense dictate the tempo. And we've seen very different styles every week, whether, Notre Dame to South Florida to even Florida State. Every week you're going to see something different. Florida was completely different. And for us, it's, being physical from whistle to whistle, playing start to finish. But like you said, the penalties, aggressive penalties, we can coach. Aggressive penalties, we can get that fixed. It's the discipline, the jumping offside or the roughing or diving on a pile. Some of those things we just got to be smarter in those situations. And that was part of our meeting today with the players. That's what we've talked about as a staff. And there's definitely little details we got to get cleaned up. We got a horse collar. It's got to be a pin the knees and a wrap and roll. We get the roughing on the sideline. We got to be smart and know where we are on the field right there. And that's something that we addressed with the defense today, and we will get that cleaned up. But we're going to continue to be a physical football team as we go forward.
And then something I've noticed over the course of the first 5 games is that sometimes you'll load one side of the defensive line, leave Ruben kind of alone, on one side. What advantages does that give you? What works about that?
Yeah, every week we're going to try to do some different things and give the offensive line and offensive coordinator different pictures. And, sometimes it's based off, where pressure's coming from. Sometimes it's just based off a line game or a stunt, or, it might be based on their offensive line or protections. Every week we're going to try to attack things differently. And, it's different ways to contain the quarterback, bottle the pocket, give different presentations, put different things up, let them try to figure out, what we're trying to do defensively or schematically. And sometimes it's to isolate some of the different matchups that we want, maybe on a center, maybe on a guard, or sometimes on a tackle, take away chips. It's different things every week. And, it's just different things that we look into when we game plan. Okay, what advantages do we have and how do we want to try to go about, attacking the offensive side of the football this week?
Let's go back to David Lake. David, go ahead.
Yeah, Coach, you touched on this a little bit, but and I understand like the difficulty and the challenge of dealing with Castellanos as a scrambler, but I am curious how you feel like the defense performed in that facet of the game. In general, like, is there anything you feel like you would have done differently with him as a scrambler and just the challenge he poses in that phase?
Yeah, the number one thing for us was communication. And then we always want to eliminate the explosives. That was a high play, explosive offense. And I can't remember the number right now off the top of my head, how many plays over 25 yards and then how many runs over 10, how many passes over 16 they had coming in. It was one of the highest numbers I'd seen at this point in the season, going into a game. And we gave up 2 plays over 25 yards in the game. I think on play 3, they hit a wheel out of the backfield on us. And the very last play of the game, he hits a route. We miss 2 tackles. Then we escort him to the sideline. We got to tackle him inbounds. It was a 30-yard gain. Outside of that, that was the only 2 plays all game that we gave up over 25 yards. So that was kind of like the number one deal. We can't give up explosives to this team. Number 2 was, we need to create more big plays on defense than they have on offense. And, for us, that's a TFL, that's a sack, that's an interception, that's a fumble recovery. And I think we created 9 big plays on defense in those areas where offensively, I think we gave up 8. And it was, runs over 10 yards, passes over 16 yards. So we felt like we created more explosives on defense than we gave up on the day, which against that offense is very difficult to do. And, I felt like we did a really good job controlling that. It was really later in the game. I think he scrambled 9 or 10 times for 57 yards. It was something in that area. I'd have to look back at my notes. And I think we did a good job of when he did scramble, we pushed the coverage. Or when he did scramble, we plastered and we stayed on our hats. And, it was scrambles early in the game of 2 yards or 4 yards or 5 yards. And, it forced them, the first drive of the game, he scrambles that first 3rd down in the red zone. We pull him up, they kick the field goal. He had a couple other scrambles on 3rd downs and 4th downs where I think on 3rd down specifically where, he's got to slide short of the sticks. Or, we get 7 or 8 yards and we still have him in 4th and off track, and they're forced to punt the football or go for it on 4th down. Later in the game, I think, we brought a boundary pressure. We kind of hit a couple flybys and we didn't hit the movement where we wanted to. And it got us a little bit out of leverage and he scrambles for 16. And then, the touchdown later in the game, he scrambles around, we come out of coverage again. There was a 4th down later in the game on a touchdown drive where we come out of coverage. That's where, at that point, we got to stay more detailed. We got to be a little bit more disciplined in those situations because those became some of those runs over 10, passes over 16, where if we're a little bit more disciplined, we continue to contain that, to runs under 10 yards and force him to throw the ball away. I think now that 4th quarter looks very differently than it did turn out. And that was the biggest thing today in the walkthrough and, meeting with our guys and showing it to them on the film. It's just our details in those situations. We need to stay consistent for 60 minutes, all the way, play start to finish, all the way through a football game.
Great. I don't see any more hands up, so we'll wrap up there. Corey, thank you for your time, and we'll see you next week.